Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys. Today's video is about application tips, and for those who don't know who I am a second year PhD student whose PhD program and project is entirely computational and it's in the field of evolution. As the title of the video suggests, this is all about application tips to try to get you into the PhD program you would like to. I must do a disclaimer, however, this is tailored specifically to the UK. I haven't done any research for programs outside of the UK, so do just keep that in mind and have a look in your local area or wherever it is that you'd like to go for more information tailored specifically to you. First of all, what is a PhD? A PhD is a degree in which you spend a certain amount of years carrying out novel research to contribute to the field of science in a way that hasn't been done before. So whether that's finding something that is entirely new or using new techniques, just general novelty is respected in the field of science, and it has to be novel in order for you to gain a PhD. A PhD can be done in many different ways. You can do it full-time, you can do it part-time. Full-time can be 3.5 years, 4 years. Part-time can be 7 years, 10 years. There's really no limit to it, and I feel like a PhD differs wildly between different people, and no two people will have the same experience. I myself am on a 4-year DTP program, which is doctoral training program. It's still a PhD, but it just has a few other nuts and bolts added to it. So my first year I spent doing rotation, so you get to experience more than one project. So that way you get to experience different labs, different supervisors, as well as the different projects. Because as much as a PhD is important and lovely, it is really important for you to know that you're a good fit with the supervisor and the lab group, not just the project that you're working on. So in addition to doing rotations in my first year, I also have to complete a 3-month placement, which we call a PIP, which I hopefully will be going on this September. And I just thought that because I'm not entirely sure that I do really want a career in academia and I'm really looking at industry, I think that the 3-month placement, particularly if I can get it in industry, would be really beneficial for my career moving forward. And even if it is something that I decide I end up wanting to be in academia, is still useful regardless. And having a PhD program that actively encourages me going ahead and doing that, taking the 3 months out, was amazing. In addition to that, my program is funded by the BBSRC, which means I get a monthly stipend. It literally is minimum living wage, and that should be going up in September because the minimum living wage is going up. But you can survive on it and you don't have to have a part-time job if you do budget effectively, but I'll get onto that in a whole separate different video. My DTP, like I said, is 4 years, which kind of differs from the traditional 3.5 years that it typically takes most students in the UK, and it's encouraged that I do some training courses, and it's encouraged that I go and do some public outreach such as Pint of Science or talking to children or presenting my research somewhere where it typically wouldn't have been presented. They encourage, of course, going to conferences and things like that. So I just felt like a DTP program would be more beneficial to me than somewhere else. Just a bit of background on me. I did do biomedical science both at undergrad and masters, and I'm currently doing computational biology or bioinformatics as my PhD, as I previously mentioned in some other videos. And something I was really concerned about going into the application process was the fact that I didn't really have any solid computing history. And I thought, well, would they take me onto a PhD where I hadn't done evolution really before I don't think in any capacity actually, and would they take me having not really done much bioinformatics either? And the answer is yes. If you can sell yourself good enough, who are they to say no? So one thing I should definitely say is if you're coming from the route that I came from, which is not having the maybe best degree for the PhD you'd like to go for, I think any kind of experience you could possibly get is absolutely brilliant. So I did spend a year working in a COVID research lab, and I used that experience to try to get across how I've done wet lab, both in my university, in my projects, and outside of university. And I know for sure I don't want to do wet lab, but I know for sure I do want to do dry lab. And I basically explained how I was the middleman between the wet lab and the dry lab. So although I didn't necessarily actively participate in any data analysis or things like that, I worked very closely with people who did. So that way it helps them understand that you truly know what bioinformatics or whatever it is that you want to research is. But I thought I'd just slide this in here. This happened a few months after my interviews and everything, so I didn't mention this in my interview or my application, but I did actually bump into somebody on the train who had the logo of a big bioinformatics company, and I literally just asked him if I could get some work experience there, and I ended up being their first ever intern, So that was pretty cool. So just as a side note, if you don't have experience, you should definitely reach out to people, whether that's emailing people from your university or other universities, reaching out to people on Twitter, alumni, literally any avenue. Walking into a place where you know you'd like to work one day and seeing if you can try and speak to somebody, literally anything in order to get experience is always going to set you apart from other people, because there are people who are going to be applying who have done a master's, and in this country at least you don't have to do a master's to get accepted onto a PhD program. So just do anything you can to set yourself apart from other people. I think that when you are choosing a PhD and in turn a supervisor, you should definitely interview the supervisor as well. So getting to understand how their management style works, because everyone works very differently. Some supervisors will take a more hands-on approach and some will take more of a distance, hands-off approach. So it's really up to you guys to try to figure out what that means for you, because there's no point, again, being accepted onto a PhD program and you just don't work well with the supervisor or vice versa. I personally don't have this issue because I'm so lucky, but I have heard of other situations where people's supervisors and themselves, they just go head to head and like they don't see eye to eye whatsoever. Before applying, I think it's super important for you to note down all the deadlines in whichever format that is most useful to you, whether that's putting it on your iPhone calendar, your Google calendar, making notes with all of the deadline dates and all those kinds of things, but you just need to make sure you don't miss any deadlines. When you're noting down these deadlines, I think that you should also note down when you'd like to have your proposed draft in by, or your actual final application form. Some PhD applications will require you to write a research proposal. That is when you are proposing your own idea for research, and other PhD projects will require you to apply to a project as opposed to creating your own. Plenty of research programs will have a 2 or 3-fold application or interview process. Mine was 2-fold, where I spoke to a team of researchers and academics, where I had to explain my previous research, my skills, and more technical things. And then I had a second interview where it was more personable skills as opposed to just technical. So all of those kind of transferable skills. I know that this may be very obvious for some of you, but for others it may not be. During your application, whether it's a cover letter, whether it's you answering questions that they ask you in the form, you are not meant to beg. The whole point of you answering these questions or filling out a form or giving a cover letter is your chance to be able to prove to them why you are suited for this role. It's not an opportunity for you to beg and tell them how amazing you'd be if you'd just be given the opportunity. It comes across as desperate and really just takes up too much of the word count. You can literally use anything to prove why you are able to do this role as a PhD student. You could have worked at McDonald's and explained how you've been in high pressure environments and that makes you suited to the high pressure environment of a PhD. Your customer service skills have helped you develop the ability to communicate with various different types of individuals. During undergrad, you presented to a room of people who had different understanding in your field, and some of those people had no clue about your research field entirely, so you had to be able to tailor your speech and your presentation to accommodate the people who had a lot of understanding as well as the people who didn't. They're not really looking for academic excellence, because even the most academically excellent individuals can fail out of a PhD. What they're really looking for are people who have the drive, the determination, and the awareness of what a PhD is. They want to know you have the right coping mechanisms for when times get hard. I would just like to say that I personally am a huge advocate for doing doctoral training programs over traditional PhDs. I feel like there is a wider support network within DTPs because you have a whole team behind you, you have a welfare team, and you have a cohort. So there's about 40 to 50 of us that started at the same time and will finish roughly at the same time as well. So when we have our training weeks together or training sessions, we see each other. To be fair, it's not very often, and we tend to have training weeks maybe twice in an academic year, but then we have conferences that we have to attend all together and some other things. So I do end up seeing them more frequently than just the 2 times in the year. And there's obviously people in the year above, the year below, so on and so forth. I think one thing that every creator will tell you is how isolating a PhD is, and don't go into it thinking you're going to be so much different. Unless all of your friends are PhD students and a lot of them are understanding of the field that you're in, and in which case you're extremely lucky. Well, if that's not the case, then you will feel the loneliness at some point or the other. So having like-minded individuals on a cohort really does make things easier, especially as a person of colour, where many people around me don't even know what a PhD is, let alone consider themselves worthy of a PhD or to embark on one. You can find DTP positions on so many different websites. Like I said, mine is BBSRC funded. You might be able to find one using NERC and all these other funding bodies. Just type in DTP opportunities in the areas around you. Check your university to see if they are part of one. There are multiple DTP programs within the UK. I'm on the Nottingham branch, but there's a Southwest and there's a Soco Bio, and I think there's a few others as well. I'm also part of a BAME initiative where we would like to gather all of the BAME students eventually from all the DTP programs across the UK, so that we can have the same kind of professional and personal building, so we can get to know each other, network, have some fun, have more of a support network. So these are definitely things that you should look out for when you're applying to programs, because you want to know that they care for your well-being and not just care for it but actively do things about it. That's actually one of the reasons I chose to come to Nottingham, for various reasons, but the main one was they seem to actively try to recruit more black students into academia, obviously trying to do their part in reducing the racial disparity. So if you're a person of colour, try to look out for those initiatives, because in Nottingham all BAME students will receive an interview regardless of their grades. This means that the University of Nottingham is taking into account the fact that there may have been things in your history that has equated to you not getting as good grades as maybe some of your other counterparts, and this isn't something that is widely known enough, and it frankly should be. So it tries in a way to level out the playing field. In addition to that, you can also get a peer mentor, so someone who's made it onto the PhD program. You can have a chat with them, understand what the program is more about. You can meet up with them if that's comfortable for you and the mentor. They can also help you understand a bit more about the application process and the kinds of things that you need to know, because for a lot of us, especially those of us who are from ethnic backgrounds, we are first generation graduates. Our parents don't know much about these things, so it can be a lot harder for us to be able to have the knowledge and insight into what it is you should be doing. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I did try to stay away from the typical application tips that you hear on every other channel, and I tried to give you something different. If this is something that you enjoyed, please like, comment and subscribe, and reach out to me on other social media platforms if there's any other content that you would specifically like to hear about. Until next time, I've been Malaya, and enjoy your day.